The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 are kind of mediocre sequels to the original Jurassic Park, but they're not nearly as catastrophic as the Jurassic World sequels. But why weren't they able to equal Jurassic Park in quality and ultimately became irrelevant in comparison to the original Jurassic Park? Because while they're not nearly as great as Jurassic Park, I wouldn't say that they're bad movies outright. However, they do suffer from common issues that tend to hold movies back, like logical consistency and character investment. Let's start with The Lost World. The Lost World has Jeff Goldblum returning as Dr. Ian Malcolm, and introduces a few new characters, but those characters don't carry as much weight or inspire as much investment as Ian Malcolm. There are also some bizarre choices that really break the tone of the movie. The most glaring one being the fact that Eddie Carr's sacrifice doesn't get acknowledged, while the other characters are fairly thinly written, which is why I struggle to get invested in any of them rather than Malcolm. Also, the Velociraptor sequence is a lot worse in this film in comparison to the first one. The tall grass scene is fine, but the scene where Malcolm, Sarah, and Kelly run around velociraptors and Kelly's gymnastics training allows her to kill a velociraptor is just tonally off-putting. At least it was established earlier that Kelly is a gymnast, so there's some good old setup and payoff there. But if at the beginning of the movie I had been told that Kelly's gymnastics background would allow her to kill a velociraptor, I would have been extremely surprised. It's not that I find it objectively bad or illogical, I just find it tonally off and degrading the danger that the velociraptors pose to the humans. But the bigger issue is that the two T-Rexes managed to sneak up on 20 armed men, and only Roland tries to shoot them. I mean, these guys are supposed to be competent hunters, and they would have come to the island prepared to encounter dinosaurs. They would have their guns on the ready to fire at anything that moves towards them. They would take the two T-Rexes down in an instant. Of course, some hunters would still likely die, but there is literally no way that this group of 20 people with guns doesn't just take down these two T-Rexes. That's also somewhat of an issue with the sequels in general. When you have people with guns just not shooting dinosaurs, it really takes away from the believability. Like in Fallen Kingdom, Blue almost dies from a single gunshot. The velociraptors in the tall grass would actually have an edge against the humans, and that would actually have made for a better scene if we saw RJ and the remaining hunters fighting them in the tall grass. The humans have guns, but the velociraptors have the element of surprise, and ultimately the humans would lose, because there are so many velociraptors, and they have the upper hand in the tall grass. Also, something that's maybe an issue but honestly more of a nitpick is that the T-Rex is tranquilized off-screen. It's kind of like Alan missing the shotgun shots against the velociraptor in the first movie. However, in the first movie, I never really thought it was a problem. When I recall watching The Lost World for the first few times, I completely missed that Roland tranquilized the T-Rex, and that's how it got captured. Maybe because I was a lot younger back then, but even though I've probably rewatched The Lost World over 20 times by now, this scene still feels odd, which is how I would describe The Lost World in general. Odd and tonally off. It doesn't manage to preserve the wonder of the original Jurassic Park, and instead becomes more of a generic sci-fi adventure, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. But because there is not much to latch onto and build investment around, the movie feels hollow. Like there is an idea here, but the end product is different from what was intended. At least that's how I feel it turned out. Also, whenever I rewatch this movie, I actually don't watch the San Diego sequence because I don't find it engaging at all. It's just not believable. If there were a T-Rex in San Diego, the police would just shoot it and kill it. That's how it would go down. The T-Rex would not be able to rampage all over the city, and Sarah and Ian definitely would not be the ones to handle it. By the time Peter Ludlow is telling whoever he's on the phone with to shoot the adult T-Rex, that adult T-Rex would already be dead. No way a T-Rex would be allowed to rampage through San Diego like this for so long. Jurassic Park 3, on the other hand, suffers from similar issues as The Lost World, but is in my mind even worse. Jurassic Park 3 has Sam Neill returning as Alan Grant, and some other new characters who also lack investment into the story in comparison to Alan. The internal logic in Jurassic Park 3 is worse than in The Lost World, and it has a lot more issues, even though it has a considerably lower runtime. The fact that the Kirbys say during their dinner meeting that they're going to Isla Sorna, which is the Site B island from The Lost World, and not Isla Nublar, where Alan actually was during the first Jurassic Park, creates an issue. Later, when they're on the island, they talk about how Alan hasn't actually been here before, even though they literally said Isla Sorna instead of Isla Nublar here. The Kirbys know that they're going to Isla Sorna, so why bother getting Alan Grant? Also, someone who had already been to Isla Sorna and would likely be keen on helping the Kirbys is Ian Malcolm. So wouldn't it make more sense to fake hire him instead of Alan? That way they could have actually gotten all of the characters from The Lost World back into the fold, with Ian Malcolm, Sarah Harding, Nick Van Owen, and even potentially Roland. And if the Kirbys told Ian what was happening, he and Sarah would likely altruistically, without the need for money, just go to the island to find Eric. But fake hiring Alan makes no sense, given what they know. And the fact that Alan and Billy fall for the ruse that the Kirbys have a lot of money doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't Alan have verified the validity of that check? Even if he's desperate for money, I don't think Alan and Billy would be so naive. But even before the main plot starts happening, there is some nonsense here that immediately makes my brain hurt. In Alan's speech, he says that if the velociraptors hadn't been wiped out by the meteor, they would have become the dominant species on planet Earth. Now, I can completely get behind the idea that the velociraptors are perhaps the most intelligent animals after humans in the Jurassic universe. I myself like that idea. But saying that they would have surpassed humans as the dominant species is nonsensical. But then, when they're on the actual island, they have two qualified mercenaries with guns, yet they missed the Spinosaurus during a shootout off-screen. Cooper should have at least visibly wounded the Spinosaurus, or even managed to kill it. Because guns kill dinosaurs. When you have people with guns, but they either miss or just don't shoot, it doesn't make sense and it takes away from the believability. Also, the Spinosaurus being able to sneak up on people, and the fact that the telephone inside its stomach is what gives its position away, instead of its thundering footsteps, is nonsensical. It's also interesting to think that Isla Sorna, the same island where both of these movies took place, houses the Spinosaurus and at least 3 or more T-Rexes, among other big carnivores, completely without fences. So when Ian Malcolm and the others went to Isla Sorna, they could have ran into the Spinosaurus. And if Roland truly wanted to hunt the most impressive predator, then it would be the Spinosaurus, because the Spinosaurus was made bigger than the T-Rex, even though it historically wasn't. Also, the InGen list subplot is not explored at all in the movie. Billy initially thinks that the Spinosaurus is a Suchomimus or Baryonyx because they were on InGen's list, unlike the Spinosaurus. Because why else would someone like Billy, who is a paleontologist, mistake the Spinosaurus for another piscivore, despite the very distinct sail on its back? So Jurassic Park 3 also undermines The Lost World, because Hammond should have mentioned to Ian that hey, by the way, we have these other dinosaurs here too, like the Spinosaurus, who are really dangerous, not just the raptors and the T-Rex. These logical inconsistencies alone would have made it impossible for The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 to equal the original Jurassic Park, which there are also definitely more issues with both movies that I haven't even mentioned here. But even beyond the logical inconsistencies, the characters are weaker than in the original Jurassic Park. I think that between The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, The Lost World is slightly better because it has fewer issues. But the overall investment for both movies is a lot lower than for the original Jurassic Park, because there's not much sustenance here. And by sustenance, I mean engaging characters who can pull the viewer into the story. Especially in The Lost World, where the movie has a lot more runtime, It would make sense to develop the characters further when the plot is more centered around them. In the original Jurassic Park, the characters worked because they supported the plot and the themes. But the characters in these sequels don't really do either of those things, so they would need to be developed more thoroughly. There isn't just much to latch onto in terms of rewatch value and engaging characters in these movies. I personally find that characters are the driving force of any story, which is why engaging characters are the most important thing. And while the characters in The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 are not terrible, it's more like the plot drives the story instead of the characters driving the story, which is somewhat of a recurring theme in the Jurassic sequels. The plot is usually just escape and fight the big bad dinosaur, while some kind of secondary plot is happening on the side. But the sequels seem to mistake the dinosaurs for the thing that made Jurassic Park a great movie. Sure, the dinosaurs are great, and I also enjoy the CGI generated dinosaurs in the Jurassic World movies. But the characters are the driving force, along with consistency and continuity. Though The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 are still way better than the Jurassic World movies, they're still nowhere near Jurassic Park. And to be honest, it would be difficult to make a Jurassic sequel that rivals the original Jurassic Park in quality, because Jurassic Park is such a great movie. I wouldn't say that The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 are bad movies. They more or less fall somewhere in the middle between a good movie and a bad movie. I actually rewatch The Lost World from time to time, because I still find that there's enough to enjoy there, but mostly because Ian Malcolm is one of my favorite characters of all time. But if The Lost World didn't have Malcolm, I probably wouldn't be rewatching it. But I hadn't seen Jurassic Park 3 in years, and I rewatched it specifically to make this video, which was a first for me. But it only reminded me as to why I'm not interested in rewatching it. Still, the original Jurassic Park reigns supreme among the Jurassic films, and I think it will stay that way, because the Jurassic movies don't get any better from here on. They unfortunately only get worse.